Thousands of people come to electric forests searching for something. Some came looking for music. Some came looking for freedom. Others came hoping to lose themselves for just one weekend beneath towering pines, flashing lights, and the promise that inside this forest, strangers become family. But for one man, the forest never gave him back. Jerard Jackson was 28 years old, a son, a nephew, a friend, a man with plans beyond one summer weekend. He packed his bags, met up with friends, and traveled to one of America's most celebrated music festivals in Rothbury, Michigan. Like thousands before him, he expected memories. Instead, his family would receive questions that still echo through the same woods today. Because sometime during the early morning hours, Jerard became separated from the people who arrived with him, separated from his phone, separated from his keys, separated from certainty itself. Hours later, he reportedly encountered law enforcement. According to public statements, officers believe he was simply upset after an argument involving members of his group. No arrest, no emergency intervention, no transport for medical evaluation, just another festival interaction. Or so it seemed. Then he disappeared. Days passed. Searches intensified. Loved ones waited for a phone call that never came. And then deep inside those woods, not inside the campground, not inside a tent, not walking back towards friends, Jerard Jackson was found hanging. Before many people even had time to process what had happened, a family phrase began spreading through headlines. Appears to be suicide. 4 words: simple, clinical, final. But were they earned? Or were they simply convenient? Because Jerard's family says there are pieces on this story that just don't fit. Why were his belongings separated? Who last saw him alive? Why did reports surface that someone accessed his bank account after he vanished? Why do witnesses describe confusion, while official statements suggest certainty? And perhaps the question that refuses to disappear: how does a man arrive at a music festival surrounded by tens of thousands of people only to end up alone, hanging in a forest? Tonight, we are not here to replace one conclusion with another. We are not here to manufacture villains. And we are not here to feed conspiracy. We are here because every investigation deserves evidence before certainty. Every family deserves answers before assumptions. And every life deserves to be remembered for far more than the way it ended. Because sometimes the loudest thing in a case isn't what investigators say. It's what they never explain. Ladies and gentlemen, you just walked into the Lounge of Truth. Welcome to Cigar A Crime, where the smooth draw of a fine cigar meets the hard truths of justice. I am your host. You know me, Dr. D, and this is the Lounge of Truth. This isn't a courtroom. This isn't social media. And this certainly isn't a place where rumors become facts. Here, we slow everything down. We separate emotion from evidence, headlines from history, and conclusions from proof. Every week, we examine cases that deserve more than a passing headline. Cases where families continue searching for answers, where questions remain long after the cameras disappear, and where the truth is often buried beneath assumptions. Tonight, we travel to the woods of Rothbury, Michigan, a place known around the world for music, community, and escape. But for one family, those woods became the setting of a tragedy that still raises difficult questions. Jerard Jackson entered Electric Fest expecting a weekend with friends. He never came home. Authorities would eventually say his death appeared consistent with suicide. His family says that conclusion doesn't match the man they knew or the questions they continue asking. Our responsibility tonight is not to decide what happened. Our responsibility is to examine what is known, identify what remains unknown, and follow the evidence wherever it leads. Because around here, we don't chase smoke, we follow it. And as always, you know, the smoke, it never lies. Every episode of Cigar A Crime begins with a cigar. You guys know this. Not because smoking solves mysteries, but because slowing down does. Today's cigar is the Liga Tridente Maduro Toro, a handcrafted Honduran cigar featuring a dark Maduro Carujo wrapper with a blend of Nicaraguan and Colombian tobaccos. It delivers rich notes of cocoa, roasted coffee, macadamia, and a subtle sweetness that gradually gives way to a deeper, more complex finish. What's interesting is that this isn't just another boutique cigar. It's the signature premium cigar that's co-owned by actor, comedian, entrepreneur Marlon Wayans. Wayans has described this cigar as one of his favorite cigars. But tonight, I didn't choose this cigar because of the celebrity behind it. I chose it because of what it represents. The name, Tridente, which means trident. A trident has 3 points. For me, those 3 points represent the 3 things every serious investigation must stand on: evidence, accountability, truth. If one point breaks, the entire investigation becomes unstable. That's exactly where this case lives. On the surface, the story appears straightforward. A man attends a music festival. He becomes separated from his group. Days later, he is found hanging. Authorities quickly announce that the circumstances appear consistent with suicide. Case closed, except beneath that polished surface, questions begin appearing. Questions about timelines, questions about personal belongings, questions about witness accounts, questions about investigative procedures. Like this Maduro wrapper, the deeper you go, the darker the story becomes. The cocoa reminds me that the life can still contain sweetness before the tragedy. The coffee reminds me that the investigations require patience and clarity, not assumptions. And the long, slow finish reminds me that the consequences of unanswered questions don't disappear when the headlines do. Because Jerard Jackson wasn't simply a case number. He was someone's son, someone's nephew, someone's friend, someone whose family continues asking these questions they believe deserve answers. So tonight, as the smoke slowly rises, we're not smoking to celebrate. We're smoking to remember. And as always, the smoke never lies. Let's talk about the man before the headlines. Before he became another headline. Before his name became the center of online debates. Before strangers argued over theories they couldn't possibly prove. There was simply Jerard J. Jackson, 28 years old, from Illinois, a son, a nephew, a cousin, a friend, a young black man whose family knew him not as a case file, but as someone they loved. You know, the public often remembers people by the worst day of their lives. Their families remember everything else. They remember birthdays, family cookouts, phone calls that lasted longer than expected, holiday laughter, inside jokes that no one outside the family would ever understand. Those are the moments that never make police reports. Those are the memories that never appear inside an autopsy. And those are the moments that matter most. Those closest to Jerard affectionately called him Jay. To the public, he became the missing man from Electric Forest. To the people who loved him, he was still Jay. That distinction matters because when someone loses their humanity in the media, it's easier for the world to accept quick conclusions. By every verified public account, Jay enjoyed traveling. He enjoyed spending time with friends. Like thousands of other young adults that weekend, he made the trip to Michigan looking for music, community, and a few days away from everyday responsibilities. Electric Forest wasn't supposed to become the final chapter of his story. It was supposed to become another memory. Instead, it became the memory that changed his family's lives forever. Families often know the small things that never become evidence. Whether someone who was making plans for next month, whether they had just talked about future vacations, whether they were excited about work, whether they had been helping someone else through difficult times, those details don't automatically prove or disapprove what happened. But they help investigators understand a person instead of reducing them to a manner of death. Good investigators, they don't begin with how did this person die? They begin with who was this person? Because understanding a life, it often helps explain the final hours of it. The family speaks. When someone dies under disputed circumstances, investigators often begin by studying the evidence. The families, they begin somewhere else. They begin with the person they knew. For Jerard Jackson's family, the conclusion that his death was a suicide isn't simply difficult to accept. It is a conclusion they believe is unsupported by the facts they have been told. Jerard's aunt, LaToya Neal, and his stepfather, Sean, have publicly stated that they don't believe Jerard took his own life. His stepfather pointed to something investigators and the public should never overlook. His stepfather said they took his phone and keys away. Everybody, including our son, knows he's directionally challenged. He does not go anywhere without a phone. And to be honest with you guys, who do you know that, especially that young, would go anywhere without their phone? Sean also noted that Jerard's friends themselves listed his phone number as the contact number on the missing person report, raising questions about how and when Jerard became separated from the very phone his family says he never went anywhere without. For his aunt, the official explanation simply doesn't match the man she knew. She stated no way he committed suicide. He was just enjoying life, living life to the fullest. This makes no sense. End quote. Those words are not forensic evidence. They are something equally important in any serious investigation. Victimology. The people closest to Jerard are telling investigators and the public that the official narrative does not align with the person they knew. The family's concerns extend beyond the ruling itself. LaToya Neal has publicly accused both some of Jerard's friends or companions and law enforcement of misleading the family about critical details surrounding this investigation. According to Neal, investigators told the families that Jerard's body was discovered approximately 150 to 200 feet from the rental vehicle. Yet public reporting also states that Connor Prettyman said he was the one who located the rental car. Those two facts are not necessarily inconsistent, but they raise important investigative questions about who found what, when each discovery occurred, and how that information was communicated to the family. Sean also expressed frustration over what he viewed as changing public accounts. Referring to Prettyman's public statements, he said he constantly kept changing stuff based on the situation. That statement represents Sean's opinion, and it has not been independently verified. It should therefore be understood as an allegation made by a grieving family member, not as an established fact. Perhaps the family's most pointed criticism centers on Jerard's reported state before he disappeared. In public post, Prettyman suggested Jerard experienced a mental health crisis and was attempting to report crimes. LaToya Neal strongly disputes that characterization. She questioned whether references to a mental health crisis were being used to explain away other events that occurred during the trip. She said when Connor was putting those types of things in his post and saying he had a mental health crisis, that he was reporting crimes, well, what crime was he reporting that didn't happen? And why don't you just say we're getting high? End quote. That statement is a serious allegation made by Jerard's aunt. There is currently no publicly released evidence confirming that those members of the group were using illegal drugs or that anyone attempted to conceal criminal activity. Likewise, there is no public evidence substantiating Neal's accusation. It remains part of the family's public stated concerns and should be presented as such. As investigators, our responsibility is not to decide who is right. Our responsibility is to recognize that these unresolved questions exist. Because once a family begins to question the unofficial narrative, every unanswered question becomes another piece of the investigation. And before we can understand how Jerard Jackson's life ended, we have to understand everything that happened during the hours before he disappeared. Now, I want to get into the timeline of events. The hours the forest has not explained. To understand what happened to Jerard Jackson, we have to return to the final hours of the electric forest. Not the discovery of his body, and not the initial suicidal determination, but the hours before he was ever reported missing. Inside that window, between a campsite, a police encounter, a rental vehicle, and a wooded trail, Jerard's movements become unclear, and accounts began to diverge. This is not a minute-by-minute timeline. It cannot be. Key records have not been released, including police reports, dispatch logs, body cam footage, witness statements, phone data, vehicle data, and toxicology results. What follows is a reconstruction based on Michigan State Police statements, reporting family interviews and comments from Connor Prettyman. Where the record is silenced, it is noted. Where accounts conflict, Both are included. Let's get into June 25th, when the electric forest begins. It opened June 25th at Double JJ Resort in Rothbury, Michigan, drawing tens of thousands of attendees. Jerard traveled from Illinois with friends in a rental vehicle he reportedly drove. The exact departure time, travel details, and full passenger list have not been confirmed. Unanswered questions include who was in the car, who could drive, and whether any issues occurred before arrival. These details matter because timelines began before a crisis, not after it. June 25th through the 28th, the festival weekend. Public accounts can be limited and sometimes conflicting. We understand that. Connor Prettyman, Jerard's best friend, told the Atlanta Black Star that Jerard seemed not like himself. He appeared withdrawn and spent time isolated in the rental vehicle. He said friends tried to comfort him. Prettyman also said that Jerard used drugs during the weekend, though he did not know which substances. Interesting. Jerard's aunt, LaToya Neal, she alleged that the group was involved with some serious drugs and questioned whether a mental health narrative was later used to explain the events. The family also said they had concerns about the group before the trip. At this time, it is unknown what substances Jerard used, if any, when or where they were obtained, whether others used the same substances, whether medical staff evaluated him at all, whether any mental health diagnosis existed. Okay? No public records, no public medical records confirm a prior mental health condition. We want to set that record straight right now. June 28th and the 29th, the final festival hours. By Sunday, the festival was ending and attendees were preparing to leave, right? The critical gap begins here. There is no verified account of Jerard's movements between the end of the festival and Monday morning. Unknowns include when he was last seen stable, whether any conflict occurred, whether he slept, who had his phone or keys. When concern first arose, June 29th, police are called. Michigan State Police responded to Jerard's campsite Monday morning. The exact dispatch time is not public. The agency said Jerard reported an alleged criminal incident involving a friend, and that no evidence supported the claim. However, the Atlanta Black Star reported an investigator later that said Jerard called police on himself, believing he had committed a crime. These accounts differ significantly, and they cannot be reconciled without the original dispatch audio reports or body cam footage. Key unknowns include what Jerard actually said, his condition, and whether he requested help or was evaluated. Now let's get into the campsite encounter. According to the police, they interviewed all involved parties, but Prettyman later said he was never formally interviewed by detectives. It is unclear who was awake, who was questioned, and whether formal statements were taken from everyone present. That is very conflicting. Police state that Jerard left the campsite alone around 10 a.m., leaving his phone and belongings behind. Now, the family disputes this, saying his phone and keys were taken from him. This is a major contradiction. It is unclear how Jerard later assessed or operated the rental vehicle if his keys were taken. Understand this. The last confirmed sighting of Jerard is listed at approximately 10 a.m. though it is unclear whether this is based on direct observation, surveillance, or witness estimate. So after 10 a.m., the timeline breaks. After Jerard left, his movements are unknown. Unanswered questions include his route after leaving the festival, whether GPS or cameras tracked him, why he stopped near the Heart Montage Trail, and whether anyone saw him after departure. Vehicle data, surveillance footage, and phone records have not been released. 12:01 p.m. Bank alert now. Jerard's family reports an attempted bank login at 12:01 p.m. This has not been publicly verified, though. If accurate, those bank records could show device type, location, and authentication details. But it is unknown whether the attempt was successful or who initiated it. So the vehicle is found. That time is unknown. Police located Jerard's rental vehicle in Rothbury. It was unoccupied with his wallet and keys inside. Predyman reportedly found the vehicle, though the method and timing are unclear. The family claimed the doors were open. Police have not confirmed this. These are critical unanswered details that include vehicle condition, forensic evidence, or whether it showed signs of multiple occupants. So Monday afternoon through the evening, the search gaps. Jerard was missing, but the public record does not show when the search began, which agencies participated, whether drones or K9 units were used, whether the wooded area was previously searched. His body was later found close to the trail near the vehicle, but the exact distances varied between the reports, and they have not been clearly reconciled. June 30th, the discovery. Jerard was found deceased in a wooded area near the Heart Montage Trail. The exact time and who discovered his body have not been publicly confirmed. His aunt said the coroner described the death as hanging. Now, police did not include that detail in their public statement. I'm quite sure they didn't. Michigan State Police said that death appears to be suicide, but acknowledged the investigation is ongoing pending autopsy results. An investigator reportedly added, "It looked like that. And please keep in mind, this is a preliminary observation, not a final determination." The missing interval here, from 10 a.m. Monday to Tuesday morning, Jerard's movements remain largely unaccounted for. These unanswered questions, where he traveled, when the vehicle stopped, when he left it, what happened at 12:01 p.m., when and how he died, how long he was in the woods before discovery. This gap cannot be resolved through assumptions, guys. It requires records, timestamps, and verified evidence. Jerard Jackson was last confirmed alive at approximately 10 a.m. Monday. By the next morning, he was found in the woods. Between those points lies a day of missing information, unseen movements, unreviewed evidence, and unanswered questions. This does not prove what happened, but it does prove the story is not complete. And before any final conclusion is accepted, those missing hours deserve to be accounted for. Now let's go into the police encounter, the investigation breakdown. Before Jerard Jackson vanished, he was standing in front of the Michigan State Police, alive, speaking, and trying to communicate something. That encounter may be the most important moment in this case. Michigan State Police said that Jerard reported an alleged criminal incident involving a friend. That's what they said. Troopers responded, investigated, and found no evidence of a crime at the festival. Jerard then left alone. That is the official account. However, an investigator cited by the Atlanta Black Star described a different version, that Jerard believed he himself had committed a crime, and that officers and companions reassured him he had not. These are materially different accounts. One suggests Jerard was reporting an external incident. The other suggests internal distress or guilt. Without the call recording, the dispatch logs, body camera footage, or incident report, the public cannot determine what was actually said or observed. Which brings me to a question. What did officers observe? The key unanswered questions include: was Jerard coherent or confused? Was he intoxicated, distressed, or disoriented? Did he understand time, place, and situation? Did he express self-harm or fear of others? Did the officers assess mental health or substance use? Was medical help offered or considered? Was he evaluated for safe travel? Now, Connor Prettyman later described Jerard experiencing a high mental health crisis and acknowledged drug use. Those substances were unknown. If officers encountered a potentially impaired individual, the question is, what assessment was done before allowing him to leave alone? No public records confirm whether medical personnel were called, whether a risk assessment occurred, or why no intervention followed. Michigan State Police said all involved parties were interviewed. However, Prettyman stated that he was never interviewed by detectives. This may reflect informal questions versus formal interviews now, but without records, the claim cannot be verified. Unanswered questions do include: who was interviewed and when? Were accounts recorded separately? Were witnesses under the influence? Were statements compared or influenced by group discussion? And let's talk about the law enforcement response. Jerard left Electric Fest around 10 a.m. that Monday morning. His phone and belongings were reportedly left at the campsite. His rental vehicle was later found with his wallet and keys inside. He was not. At that point, the case involved a potentially vulnerable missing adult who had recently interacted with the police, been described as distressed, left without his phone. He abandoned or exited the vehicle. He becomes unreachable in dangerous conditions. Some of the key missing details we have to ask is when he was officially reported missing. When was that? When the vehicle was located? How quickly searches began? Who conducted the searches? How Jerard was ultimately found? And let's talk about the vehicle. The rental vehicle should have been a primary evidence scene. Now, family reports suggest the doors may have been open, though this is unconfirmed. If true, investigators should have documented door positions and interior condition, key location and ignition status, the vehicle power state, signs of struggle or disturbance, footprints or DNA evidence, fingerprints, touch DNA, vehicle telematics and GPS data, surveillance footage of the festival. There are pictures out there, but I see no surveillance footage. It is unknown whether the vehicle was treated as a crime scene or simply abandoned properly. Without that documentation, the quality of this investigation cannot be evaluated. A key unresolved contradiction involves Jerard's movements and belongings. I'm having a hard time understanding this part. His phone was reportedly left at the campsite. His vehicle was later found with his wallet and keys inside. This raises a basic question. How did Jerard operate the vehicle without his phone and belongings? And why were his wallet and keys still inside the car when it was found? That is not what's been reported. He left his belongings behind, so how is that possible? Now, this does not prove wrongdoing, but it requires clarification. The possible explanation could include he returned to the campsite after leaving, the vehicle was assessed or moved by another person. Reports of what was left behind are incomplete or inconsistent. These items were documented at different times in the recovery process. So without a full recovery report and timeline reconstruction, this contradiction remains unresolved. Now let's get into the death scene. Jerard's body was found in a wooded area near the Hart Montage Trail, approximately 150 feet from where the vehicle was located. Family reports say he was found hanging, though this has not been fully detailed in public police releases. Now, a proper investigation would document these things: ligature type and origin, knot and suspension details, height and accessibility of anchor point, the signs of struggle or movement, the footprints and environmental disturbance, the DNA or trace evidence, the consistency between body position and scene. These are standard forensic requirements, not assumptions of foul play. I want to make that clear. As far as the forensic findings are concerned, no final autopsy or toxicology report has been publicly released. These key distinctions, the cause of death and the manner of death, which is how it occurred: suicide, homicide, accident, or undetermined. A full autopsy should evaluate neck injuries, internal trauma, defensive wounds, and time of death. The toxicology should assess alcohol, drugs, prescription medications, and synthetic substances. These results are essential to understanding Jerard's condition and his ability to travel from the vehicle to the location where he was found. As far as the digital evidence is concerned, Jerard's phone was left at the campsite. A reported bank login occurred 2 hours after his disappearance. Though this is unverified, if confirmed, digital logs could reveal device and IP address, location data, authentication details maybe, account access history. His phone and companion devices may contain messages and then the calls, or perhaps both. Location history, photos and the videos, deleted communications, group chats before and after the disappearance. The digital evidence is critical to reconstructing this timeline. Let's talk about the suspects and persons of interest. No arrests or charges have been made. Michigan State Police say there is no indication of foul play. All companions are material witnesses, not suspects. Connor Prettyman, he was part of the group. He posted missing person information. He described Jerard as distressed. He acknowledged drug use. He said he was asleep when Jerard left. He found the vehicle, edited initial post, denied involvement, and he claims he was never formally interviewed, which is interesting. None of this proves wrongdoing, but it requires full recorded interviews and verification against physical evidence. So Jerard's companions, his friend group that he came there with, they returned to Illinois without him. The unclear details when it relates to this is their departure timing, their awareness of his status, whether the searches were ongoing, whether police cleared them to leave. Now, leaving is not an evidence of guilt, but timelines must be verified against all unknown or known events. Was the vehicle area searched? Jerard was found approximately 150 feet from the vehicle. Some of the unanswered questions was, why wasn't he located during initial searches? When did search efforts even begin? What terrain or visibility limitations existed? Were search logs properly maintained? Only official search documentation can resolve this. So let's talk about the two narratives, what police say versus what the family sees. By Tuesday morning, Jerard had been found. But finding Jerard did not bring clarity. It created two competing narratives. One from law enforcement, one from his family. Police say Jerard experienced a crisis. He left the electric fest alone and later died by suicide. His family sees a man separated from his phone, his keys, and his group, found hanging in the woods before the investigation was fully complete. These narratives cannot be merged emotionally. They must be tested against evidence because authority is not evidence. Grief is not evidence. Suspicion is not evidence. Only evidence is evidence. And much of it has not been publicly released. Keep that in mind. And I have to be honest with you, there is danger in this first story. Once suicide is suggested, all evidence is filtered through that lens. But alternative interpretations exist. Phone was withheld or taken. Report misunderstood. Search incomplete. Vehicle misinterpreted. Conclusions reached early. At this stage, neither theory is proven publicly. That is the point. Then there's the question about race. Jerard was a black man found hanging. That fact does not prove homicide, but it cannot be separated from history. Black families have seen cases closed too quickly, explanations accepted too easily, and investigations questioned too late. That history does not determine Jerard's death, but it determines the level of scrutiny that is required. Then there's the evidentiary middle. Between both narratives is a third space. The evidentiary middle, it contains only questions, and the main question is, what evidence excludes foul play? Until those questions, that question in particular, exists publicly, this case remains unresolved in the public record. Police see a man in crisis who left alone and died by suicide. The family sees a man separated from his belongings, surrounded by uncertainty, and labeled before the evidence was fully revealed. And in cases like this, conclusion without transparency creates doubt. And for black families in America, a hanging is never just a scene. It is history. And history demands proof, not assumption. Now next we move beyond Michigan into the pattern that makes this case impossible to view in isolation because sometimes cases do not stand alone. They echo. There are images America cannot treat as neutral. A burning cross, a rope, a tree, a black body suspended above the ground. They carry names, history, and generations of black families who witnessed violence in public while authorities looked away, participated, or later said there was nothing more to investigate. The Equal Justice Initiative, they have documented nearly 6,500 racial terror lynchings of black people between 1865 and 1950, with thousands more likely unrecorded. These were not isolated acts. They were tools of racial control meant to enforce white supremacy and silence black communities. That history does not end when the ropes came down. It affects remains in institutions, in memory, and in the caution black parents pass to their children. So when a black person is found hanging and authorities quickly say suicide, families do not hear that in isolation. They hear history. This does not mean every such case is a lynching or that every suicide ruling is false. But it does mean the burden of transparency is higher because trust has already been broken. Please understand that. And not every case is the same. Jerard Jackson's case should not be merged with every disputed death. Different evidence, different location, different findings. But a pattern still exists. Not in outcomes, but in the process. A black person is separated from their white companions, let's be honest. In early explanation forms, foul play is minimized publicly. Families learn key details through the media. Evidence is withheld or incomplete. Witness accounts conflict. The families are dismissed for even asking questions. So this is not a conspiracy. It is a crisis of confidence. And I want to give you some examples here of certain cases involving black bodies. Dolores Richardson, 2 autopsies, 2 conclusions. In September 2024, Dolores Richardson was found hanging in an abandoned house in Alabama. The state ruled suicide. A private autopsy commissioned by his family found no conclusive evidence of suicide and called for further investigation. 2 autopsies, 1 body, different conclusions. When expert opinions diverge, the public should not be told questions are conspiracy. What about Trey Reed? On September 15, 2025, Trey Reed was found hanging from a tree at Delta State University. Authorities ruled suicide and said there was no foul play. Now we're here with Jerard. Authorities said the death appeared to be suicide. The public has been asked to accept interpretation before seeing the full record. That gap, it fuels distrust. What about Nolan Wells? On July 4th of this year, Nolan Wells traveled to Horn Island with his white friends. He did not return with them. His body was found 2 days later. Authorities initially said no foul play was suspected, but this investigation is still ongoing. The case was framed so quickly as accident or exposure before the full forensic evidence was even released. An independent autopsy later found the cause and manner of death as undetermined, citing the discomposition and missing tissue that limited the conclusions. How convenient. It didn't prove homicide, but it also could not rule it out either. When evidence is incomplete, certainty should not be projected. Jerard and Nolan died in different places, under different circumstances, but similarities remain. Both were young black men. Both were with white companions. Both became separated from those companions. Both were later found dead. Both families disputed early narratives. Both cases involved incomplete or delayed evidence. This does not prove a shared cause. It shows a recurring breakdown in transparency. And race is not proof of guilt, but it shapes perception, fear, and trust. And black families often interpret these deaths through lived history, where institutions have not always protected or fully investigated black victims. That history enters the room before an official explanation does. And if you're asking what makes a pattern is not simply similar deaths. It is recurring process failures. Early conclusions before full evidence. Limited transparency. Delayed or withheld records. Families forced to seek independent autopsies. Public reassurance before forensic completion. This issue may not be coordinated violence, but institutional opacity. Before we close tonight, I want to speak to you not as a detective, not as a medical examiner, and not as someone pretending to know something that evidence hasn't proven. I want to speak to you as a black man in America. When a black person is found hanging, the word suicide does not arrive without history. It carries something with it. Trees, ropes, families denied answers, investigations that were never fully done, and generations who learned that official didn't always mean complete. And we've seen this before. September 11th, 2024, Javion McGee. June of 2025, Earl Smith. November of 2025, Tory Medley. We covered this case. February 18th, 2026, Kyle Basinga. May 8th, 2026, Juliana Nazita. And June 18th, right there in Mississippi, Tanaya Miller. All found hanging. All initially ruled suicides. That history does not prove what happened to Jerard, but it explains why people ask questions. And questions are all we have to follow. Because I am not telling you Jerard was murdered. I am not telling you his friends killed him. And I'm not telling you there was a cover-up. We don't have evidence for that. What we do have are unanswered gaps. Jerard was alive Monday morning, speaking with law enforcement. Hours later, his phone was left behind. His vehicle was elsewhere. His belongings were separated. And by Tuesday morning, he was dead. And before the full medical examiner's report was complete, the word was circulating was it appeared to be suicide. That phrase matters because appearance is not conclusion. If suicide is the answer, the evidence should clearly show it, not require people to fill in the blanks. And if it isn't, then Jerard deserves a full investigation that says so without hesitation. We've seen families in this same space before. Nolan Wells, Trey Reed, Denoris Richardson. Different cases, same pain, same uncertainty. And we have to be honest. Not every hanging is a murder. Not every case is a lynching. And not every question leads to conspiracy. But every case deserves a real investigation, not assumption. Because truth doesn't belong to police. It doesn't belong to families. It doesn't belong to the internet. Truth belongs to the evidence. Tonight, we didn't give you a villain. We didn't force an ending. We didn't pretend certainty exists where it doesn't. We followed what we could verify. Jerard Jackson was 28 years old, a son, a friend, a real person whose life mattered long before this case ever existed. And whatever the final answer is, his story should never be reduced to, it appeared to be suicide. This family deserves clarity. Jerard deserves truth. And this case deserves to be fully examined. If new evidence comes forward, Cigar A Crime will return. So I'm asking you, share this episode, not for speculation, but for awareness, for accountability, for evidence. And if you were at the electric forest and saw Jerard, recorded him, or have any information about his final hours, please come forward to investigators. Do not harass, do not accuse, do not assume. Evidence over rumors, facts over accusations, truth over everything. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to Cigar A Crime. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, follow the show and share this episode. And to Jerard's family, we remember him not only for how he died, but for who he was. I'm Dr. D. Thank you for joining me inside the Lounge of Truth. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep demanding evidence, and follow the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Because here at Cigar A Crime, you know the smoke, it never lies.